Ed and Lorraine Warren are saints to some and sinners to others, but do they deserve their reputation as paranormal legends, or has their involvement in many of their cases been greatly exaggerated? Today, we're going to dive deeper into some of the Warrens' biggest cases. I'll give you some of the backstory behind them and some of the actual truth to them as well as some of my own opinions on their experiences and just generally how Ed and Lorraine are. Hello, my name's Mike, and if you're sitting comfortably, let's begin. Chapter 1. History of the Warrens. For anyone who's been living underground for the last 40 years, Ed and Lorraine Warren were a paranormal power couple priding themselves on being involved with some of the most well-known cases in the paranormal field. They were featured heavily as characters in the Conjuring series of movies, but their involvement in some of the cases may not have been as it seems and has been greatly exaggerated in some others. Ed claims to have been a self-taught demonologist, which seems to be the modern equivalent of having a certificate in ghost hunting. Lorraine, however, claimed to be a clairvoyant and trance medium, meaning that she could channel spirits to act and speak through her. Initially, Lorraine assumed that everyone had the same abilities as her. It wasn't until her and her classmates planted a sapling in which Lorraine claims just as soon as the sapling was put in the ground, she saw a fully grown tree filled with leaves and blowing in the wind. When a nun at the school asked her what she was seeing, Lorraine told her she was just looking up into the tree. When asked by the nun if she was seeing the future, Lorraine responded, "Well, I guess I am." The depth of Lorraine's abilities seems to be very open to interpretation, as seeing the future and being a trance medium are sort of two ends of the psychic spectrum. Ed Warren also claims to have grown up in a haunted house, which is what sparked his interest in the paranormal. Ed and Lorraine met and began dating as teenagers, which unfortunately won't be the last time that Ed and teenagers are associated in this video. Ed went off to join the Navy, only to return 4 months later when the ship he was on sank. He was placed on 30 days survivor's lead, and during this time he and Lorraine got married at the age of 17. The Warrens later had a daughter they named Judy. After getting married and trying to work out what to do to make their living, both having skills as landscape artists and wanting to paint, they assumed they would make livings as artists. Rather than landscapes, they decided to go down the unusual route of painting haunted houses, which they had read about in a local newspaper. They would go to the property, sketch the house, and then offer the sketch in exchange for information about the haunting. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd be a little freaked out if I opened the door to a couple waving a sketch of my house at me and asking for more information on how it was haunted. Amazingly, this didn't lead to a series of harassment lawsuits, and for 5 years the Warrens were able to travel around the United States painting and subsequently investigating haunted houses. Note to self, I must learn to paint. Interestingly, Lorraine claims that she wasn't a believer in the paranormal initially, thinking that people who believed in ghosts were suffering from an overactive imagination. It wasn't until after her and Ed started doing investigations and that several people's accounts seemed to share similarities that she started to believe. That and the dollar signs in Ed's eyes, I imagine. Chapter 2. Amityville. The Amityville case was what put Ed and Lorraine Warren on the map. The case's roots stem from the horrific murders of the DeFeo family in 1974 at number 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville. The house lay empty until George, Kathy Lutz, and their 3 daughters moved in 1975. The family started experiencing paranormal activity and eventually fled the property when the activity became too much. For me, haunted or not, fuck living in a house that's had 6 people brutally murdered in it. The house was investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren on March the 6th, 1976. They were joined by a local news crew, which already makes this seem like a prototype for most haunted. During the investigation, a series of photos were taken, with one seemingly capturing what is referenced to as a demonic boy. The boy in this famous picture looks eerily similar to one of the crew from the local news outlet. And the photo wasn't released to the public until 1979 when George and Kathy Lutz were promoting the first Amityville horror movie. The Warrens also claimed that the house was occupied by malevolent spirits due to its history. There have been many accusations that the Amityville haunting was a hoax and entirely made up for profit. While Ed and Lorraine Warren maintain that this isn't the case, it's hard to argue the point after all the movies and books that have been created around the Amityville haunting. And while claiming that they never charged for investigations, Ed and Lorraine Warren certainly didn't die poor from their book and media deals that they had. Chapter 3. Enfield. The Enfield haunting has been sensationalized and covered at great lengths since it appeared in for a movie, The Conjuring 2, and while some of the material in the movie does reflect what is believed to have happened at the Enfield haunting, Ed and Lorraine's involvement has been greatly exaggerated, and while they play a massive part in the movie version of the Enfield haunting, in reality their involvement was no more than a flying visit. They turned up uninvited and no one really knew who they were, so they didn't stay for long before leaving, and seemingly at a later point they only wanted to be involved further when they could see that there was books that could be written about the case. What's also odd is at the time of The Conjuring 2's release, Lorraine actually attended the premiere and was quite involved with the press for the movie, along with the two sisters Janet and Margaret Hodgson, the two girls that lived through the Enfield haunting, who claimed that it was great to see Lorraine again and that she was, in their words, so supportive while they were going through their ordeal, which again sounds like marketing bullshit made up to sell a movie, because in reality they weren't that involved with the Enfield haunting. Chapter 4. The Devil Made Me Do It. The Devil Made Me Do It case refers to the first court case where demonic possession was used as the main defence for the committed crime of first-degree manslaughter. Yes, this happened. The case revolves around one Arnie Johnson, who, during an exorcism of his fiance's younger brother David Glatzel, which featured, you guessed it, Ed and Lorraine Warren, Arnie challenged the demon to leave its current host and possess him instead. Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in as a last-ditch effort to rid David of his believed demonic possession. Ed and Lorraine petitioned the Catholic Church to organise the exorcism for David, and they eventually did after numerous attempts at getting someone to come in and exorcise David, which to me seems like the nuclear option for a child that was potentially just being a little bastard. But, you know, with Ed and Lorraine around, it's one big demon party. Several months later, Arnie Johnson killed his landlord at a party. Arnie's defence lawyer argued that he was under the influence of demonic possession at the time. Fortunately, the judge wasn't buying it and Johnson was convicted, serving 5 years of a 10 to 20 year sentence. The case spawned a book called The Devil in Connecticut by Gerald Brittle with the assistance of Lorraine Warren. Lorraine claims that the profit of the book was shared with the Glatzel family. This is disputed by the Glatzels, and an almighty tornado of shit has been created by the allegations being thrown at Ed Warren and then back at the Glatzels as a sort of big he said, she said sort of scenario. Various other forms of media have also been based on the Devil Made Me Do It case, including the third Conjuring movie. Chapter 5. The Death of Ed Warren. Ed Warren died in 2006. I remember earlier when I made that comment about Ed Warren and teenagers? Well, this is where the story takes an even more sinister turn than any of their stories involving demons. In 2017, a lady called Judith Penny came forward alleging that she had been involved in a 40-year relationship with Ed Warren. The relationship started when she was 15, and according to Penny, at one point she became pregnant. Lorraine persuaded her to have an abortion because the birth of the child would have become public scandal and could have ruined the Warrens' business. Penny is also reported to have lived with the Warrens, with them giving a feeble excuse whenever someone questioned why a teenage girl who was unrelated to them was living in their house. For a man who spent his life changing demons, it's very ironic that his alleged actions paint him as such a demon himself. Chapter 6. Final Thoughts. Like a lot of people associated with the paranormal, their involvement is often accompanied by scandal, exaggeration and fakery. For me personally, any shred of true paranormal activity that the Warrens captured is massively tarnished by their greed and their want to exploit anyone for profit. The previous discussed cases are just a small cross-section of the cases that the Warrens were associated with many more having accusations of fakery associated with them as well. On a personal note, while preparing for this video I actually watched some of Ed and Lorraine Warren's official YouTube channel, and it left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, as the interviewer on their sort of talk show is one Tony Spera, who is Ed and Lorraine Warren's son-in-law. Now, I'm not sure of his angle, but he's hardly an impartial host where he's got family ties directly to the Warrens, and Ed Warren in particular seems to come across as quite disingenuous, and he seems to have a personal story about every paranormal case that's ever brought up on the show. At one point, he flippantly claims that while on a trip to Scotland he saw a cryptid or big cat, before moving on quickly and adding no more context to this story. Ed and Lorraine Warren were very religious, believing that demonic forces were likely to possess those who lacked faith. And to borrow a quote from Aleister Crowley, the more religious people are, the more they believe in black magic. And this certainly seems true in Ed and Lorraine's case, who were very quick to cry demon at every investigation they were involved in. Again, stating very matter-of-factly and flippantly that it's a demon before really looking into what the haunting could have been, which is a very convenient method when you're trying to sell books. And that's the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Watch this video next. Bye. Adding zero more.